When you find a market where nobody wants to build a product, you're either a genius or totally stupid. Competitive advantage lasts for about 2 to 3 years in any enterprise software business. Our view on acquisitions is we buy innovation, we buy product, we buy it early. Because if you buy it later, you're paying multiples for revenue, which I don't believe in. I mean, if you look at Masa, he's one of the geniuses of our times, where he's one of the very few people in the world. His risk appetite hasn't changed as he ages.
Ready to go? Nikesh, I am so excited for this. I've wanted to do this one for a long time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Not at all, but I always believe that great entrepreneurs are actually shaped pretty early in their childhoods. When you go back to your childhood, Nikesh, how would your parents have described you? How would your teachers have described a young Nikesh?
That's a good question. You know, my mother's visiting, and if you ask her, she'll tell you.
She wasn't available for comment, sadly.
She would say I always got my stuff done, never gave her any trouble. Wasn't one for rules, but not in a sort of a disruptive way. Just didn't like to follow too many rules. So I kind of did what made sense to me. And I got my stuff done on time. I was kind of pretty boring when I was a young kid.
Did you know that you were going to be successful? Some entrepreneurs have an innate feeling that they would be. Did you have that?
You know, if you talk to my wife, she'll tell you that the one thing I don't seem to lack is self-confidence. So I'm not sure when she's being, funny about it or when she's being sort of, supportive about it. But, I put my heart and soul into whatever I do. And I tell people that if there's an element of doubt in your head that you're not going to get something done, you're just increasing the probability of it not getting done. So you have to attack or address everything with some degree of conviction. And it kind of goes with life, right? I take on everything with a degree of conviction. Otherwise, why would I take a job like Palo Alto 6 years ago, right? Why would I set myself in a situation where I did not have any conviction that I was going to do well? Now, you have conviction, you walk in, and you give it your heart and soul every day.
Where was your conviction most misplaced when you review your career? Or where did you put it and it was wrongly placed?
I don't know if conviction is wrongly placed. I think conviction generally, in hindsight, you can always analyze stuff and say, oh my God, you shouldn't have had that conviction. I think you always take on stuff, A, with conviction, 2, with the belief that everybody else is going to do their part. So to make sure that the entire thing is going to work. Is usually conviction starts to not result in outcomes that you want when a lot of different people get involved and you have to rely on other people for part of your outcomes that need to happen. And then the question is, can you rally those people in your direction? I think, to be fair, situations where I wasn't able to achieve the outcome that I set out to was usually when perhaps I wasn't able to bring everybody along, or perhaps I wasn't able to convince other people who had a stake in the outcome that this was the right direction, this was the right thing to do. So there's learning in that for me. Now I had to possibly work harder on getting buy-in, or I had to work hard on understanding their perspective. So I think those are situations, if I would look back and say, my God, had I gotten those people along, I'd have gotten to a better outcome, or perhaps replaced those people, depending on what the right strategy should have been.
Is the way that you get people convinced, has that changed over time?
Yeah, look, I think we all get our first management job in life, and it's kind of like I tell people, say when they ask me, what is your advice? I say, look, we all get to where we get to a certain point in life by being individually excellent. And whether it's coming first in class or second in class or top of your class, you're really good. It doesn't matter what other people do, what other people think. You prove that you're smarter than people around you. And usually that's why you get your job. And typically when you get your first job, you're given an individual task. Whether you're coding or you're doing something else, you're actually given a task. And then you say, great, I know what the rules are. I know what it takes to win. When you get your first management job and you sit there and say, wait a minute, this is a different job. Now your task is not to do a great job yourself. Your task is to get the same level of quality from 3 people who are going to work for you. And that's where I think our first challenge comes in as individuals, as we transition from individual to manager, is like, how do I get 3 people to deliver the greatest outcome that they can deliver? And perhaps that outcome is going to be different from me.
I think it's one of the saddest things, though, in the way that we expect everyone to make that transition from IC to manager. And actually, there's nothing wrong with being a lifelong IC and being incredible at what you do. This expectation that everyone should scale, I think, is a flaw.
Oh, I totally look, by the way, organizations have understood that, and you've realized that many of these smarter organizations have IC or individual contributor ladders where you can actually be very successful as an individual contributor. But, part of it is that scale requires us to mobilize a lot of people towards a great outcome. That scaling of that requires not just sort of leading from the front and getting people convinced that this is the right thing to do. It's also to inspire them to do their best work. Because if you can get 10,000 people to motivated in the right direction, you can achieve a lot bigger sets of things. So I think that's why I don't think it's sad. I think it's just the scale of the outcome and result that you want that requires mobilizing a lot of people.
Speaking of that scale and mobilizing a lot of people, you spent a long time at Google in a very formative period of their hypergrowth profile. What are one or two of your biggest takeaways, having seen that up front, having lived it so viscerally?
And one thing which I learned at Google, which has stuck with me and I've tried to implement it at Palo Alto, is that in the end, tech companies live and die by their products. And very often, if you look at the graveyard of tech companies, you realize it's when products started to lose their shine and their luster, somebody else came up with something better, something's faster, something that worked a lot better, met the customer needs. That's when other companies starts to decay and go away.
Do you think that's still the case today, given the infinite supply of products? I think that was true a decade ago, but when discovery becomes the paramount problem today, is it not distribution that separates the winners?
It's always been a yo-yo between content and distribution. Whether you take newspapers, remember those days when people talk about they used to go on a bicycle and go throw newspapers at people's doors? That was distribution. It didn't matter who was your editor. It mattered which kid was throwing which newspaper at your door, because if you couldn't find the kid for the new newspaper that you and I decide to publish, it doesn't matter. At that point in time, distribution was king and editors were okay. Today, if you look at the internet, we can all write on the internet. Distribution is no longer a limiting factor. Today, brand and content becomes important, right? Suddenly, like the influencers who have hundreds of millions of people, look at Harry with this podcast, so many people want to watch it. His brand is important. Distribution is not your problem. You don't have to worry about saying, how do I hook up bandwidth to my house and how do I make sure that everybody in the world who wants to see this can see this?
I don't know. If you apply that to AI and you think about a lot of the unbundled, vertically specific AI applications in the application layer, actually, I think they will lose despite being better products because Microsoft has distribution. They will tack on the product, which is the same, maybe 5-10% worse, and win because they have distribution.
Well, it depends. You're talking about consumer application and enterprise. I think in enterprise, there's definitely brute force and distribution does matter. I think on the consumer front, it's the App Store. Why are certain things more successful than the others? I think you can tell me more than I can tell you. But, why is TikTok more successful? Why did MySpace never take off? Why did Snapchat take off in a certain direction? So it's kind of like distribution is available to everyone. The question is, how do you create virality? How do you get the momentum from a distribution perspective, turn that into a bigger thing than everything else in your category? I think I don't know what the current number is. I'm sure there's tens of millions of apps out there on the App Store. There'll be tens of millions of AI apps in the consumer space. Everybody's going to be fighting for mindshare.
Listen, it's the end of the day. I'm freewheeling here. You mentioned TikTok there, why they win. In large part, that people don't like to admit this, they win because they had the weapon of cash in an infinite supply that they leveraged incredibly well. Forgetting TikTok, you may agree or disagree, and you can argue back by all means. More than welcome for that one. But to what extent is cash a weapon in company building?
My old boss, Eric Schmidt, used to say, cash doesn't solve all problems for mankind, but does take care of a lot of them. So yes, having a lot of cash on balance sheet is not a bad thing. There's pros and cons. It's just like, people have too much money, they get spoiled. If companies have too much money, they get spoiled, and they're not judicious. And sometimes say, scarcity breeds the best outcomes because you're very judicious about how you spend your money. Now, in that context, cash has been useful both for enterprise companies and well-run consumer companies for creating distribution and being used as a competitive advantage. As long as you understand that you are doing that to get scale and share, and your underlying economics have to work in the long term, right? Your contribution margins have to be right. You're just spending more money acquiring customers, but your contribution margins are positive. I think the danger is when you have businesses which have negative contribution margins. It's like standing at the street corner and giving it $2 in return for $1. That's a dangerous thing to do because eventually you run out of dollars.
How do you think about projecting yourself out to a time when that does make sense? There's a lot of, sorry for just going so off track, but there's a lot of businesses where, yes, today we may be contribution margin negative, but when you actually project out a year, 2 years at scale with network effects, we actually have a very different business and margin profile.
Well, look, at the end of the day, the contribution margin that you have for your business is a consequence of both your fixed and variable cost. Now, if you say, my fixed costs are going to decline as I get scale, and to get scale, I need to go spend dollars to get to a place where my margins become positive, I understand. If your variable costs are higher than your revenue, we have a problem, because your variable costs are not going to go, start appreciate or sort of start becoming a smaller percentage of total revenue over time because they're variable costs. So I think it all depends on what you're selling, what your cost structure is, what your contribution margin profile is going to look like, and how much cash is needed to get to the other side. And can you raise that money in that time frame? Now, there are some amazing businesses. If you look at what Uber did, like Uber had to get scale because you had to build a service, you had to get distribution, and you need enough consumers to be able to use those services to be able to go make all the math work. And, both Travis and Dara eventually got to a point where they made it work. There are other businesses where it didn't seem to work. And, there are some examples, I think, where they crashed and burned because they kept burning money and then suddenly they ran out of money.
Nikesh, I don't like competitive markets. I find your customer acquisition costs are higher, your retention is lower, it takes more in terms of brand spend, it takes better product marketing, it's just you have less pricing power. They're just shittier, harder.
But it's good for the end consumer, right? Because they get two really good companies competing for their attention and creating better and better services or product for them.
Sure. I'm an investor, Nikesh.
Yes, I understand that. You want benign monopolies, which can build great businesses over time and 100x your outcomes, and then you can get out of them. Then they can worry about the regulatory issues afterwards.
Exactly.
Got it.
How do you feel about competition?
How do I feel about competition? Look, in the business we're in, the enterprise space, it's inevitable. When you find a market where nobody wants to build a product, you're either a genius or totally stupid. You're a genius because you found something nobody's figured out yet, and eventually, as you start winning, other people will figure it out and try and chase you and build product. Or you're totally stupid because there's no business there. You're just burning good money after bad. So, like in any enterprise business we discover, I think the competitive advantage lasts for about 2 to 3 years in any enterprise software business. The question is, can you go ahead and build a moat in that time frame? Can you get sort of momentum? Can you break through and get to a place where you sort of catch the wave where other people are not able to catch the wave? And there are examples in the world where certain businesses have caught it early, run that product advantage for 2 or 3 years, and kept building more advantage over that time frame where they're always a few years ahead of their competition, which today are, multi-$100 billion companies, and then become too hard to catch. In the consumer space, I think to your point, that possibly is even a shorter window than 2 to 3 years. Then that point in time, distribution and scale becomes really important. And that's where people have used both virality and some version of lots of cash on the balance sheet to drive that distribution capability, because that allows them to get escape velocity.
You said momentum there. I constantly oscillate in my mind on whether speed is the most important determinant of success in company building. How do you think about that?
In the net of it, I think momentum is important because it's both from an innovation perspective and agility perspective. Because in the early days, as when you're investing, you're building companies, you will have a lot of ideas. You will test a bunch of stuff. The question is, nobody walks out. I'm pretty sure that very rarely is it that your first incarnation of your product has perfect product market fit. That's very rare. You really, if you look at the largest companies today, they were all created for a different reason, and they ended up getting product market fit for a totally different reason, right? Well, it's a Google or Facebook or a YouTube. They're all started with different intents. Or Slack in its early generation of being a gaming company. So everybody starts with a different intent. They keep innovating, they keep iterating, they start looking at product market fit. And then suddenly, you see a spark and say, let me go double down on that spark and move as fast as I can because I want to collect more and more people around this phenomena that I'm created. So yes, I think speed is important, whether in the consumer space or the enterprise space. But enterprise customers have slightly different standards and expectations because they're highly unlikely to last too long on an experimental set of products.
I totally get that in terms of that difference. Speaking of kind of the word momentum again and speed, I do think in the investing world of your former shop in SoftBank, can I ask you, what are 1 to 2 of your biggest takeaways from there? It is such a interesting firm, and Massa is such an incredible figure. What are 1 to 2 of your biggest takeaways?
I mean, if you look at Masa, he's one of the, I think, the geniuses of our times, where he's one of the very few people in the world. His risk appetite hasn't changed as he ages.
Unbelievable.
It's funny, when we're kids, we're constantly, our parents' an entire life is spent in de-risking us, right? Don't walk across the street, hold my hand, or don't get on the bicycle, you don't know how to ride one, or, you're married, don't get a big mortgage in case you can't afford it. So if you look at how we're all brought up, over time, we're all brought up to constantly de-risk ourselves. So, our risk appetite changes unbeknownst to us. But this is an amazing man. It doesn't matter, He loses a lot of money in one deal. He stands up the next morning and says, holy shit, I found that next thing's going to be 100x from here. And he goes out and goes all in every time. And he's done that multiple times. He was the richest man in the world for 80 plus days. And then he lost a lot of money. Then went back and he levered everything and bought, SoftBank mobile business from Vodafone and turned that $1 billion investment into $40 billion. So he's been doing that on a constant basis. And look what he's done with ARM. He's taken that. And he was insistent. Said to me, I've been wanting to buy that business for 18 years. This time I'm going to buy it. And I myself couldn't understand why he thought it was going to be so valuable. Look, today is a $130 billion company. And he was right. Not just that, he actually bought a bunch of it back pre-IPO because he still believed in it. So you've got to give him high marks for conviction, something we talked about earlier. You got to give him high marks for his risk appetite. And, he goes all in.
How did you prevent the de-risking in yourself?
I think compared to Masa, all of us are on the de-risked phase compared to what he's able to do and how he's able to sort of execute. So no, I think relative to him, we're all de-risked.
What was the hardest part of the role? When you look at it from the outside, respectfully, Nikesh, it just looks like you smashed it, well done, and breezy. I'm sure there were internal challenges. What was the hardest part about adopting the new role?
The hardest part was being stupid. I don't understand. I did not understand anything about cybersecurity. And then if somebody walk in the first day and somebody said, well, firewall measures, there's north and south traffic and east and west traffic. So what does that mean? So then SSL decryption, but when you decrypt the traffic, you inspect it, you encrypt it. I said, what is this guy talking about? Right? And they said, well, then sometimes you need a proxy server. Zscaler uses that. Well, you don't use that. So this is just like every sentence is new. Like I didn't go to school. I didn't go to cybersecurity school. I landed myself a top job in a company that does this for a living. So every morning, every person who walks in has more wisdom, more knowledge, more experience than you. Over time, you start to feel stupid. And it's your job to parse through all that stuff and try and make sense of it. And you don't know when the next sentence comes out of your mouth whether it's a really good question or it's a really stupid question. So yes, the hardest part is going through the learning process in full public display and then getting those people to do things which you think make sense where you might have just said a whole bunch of stupid things right before that. That's kind of a complicated tightrope to navigate.
Were you nervous about having conviction in a new field where you didn't have such knowledge? People listen to your words. You're the CEO. They carry weight. I would be nervous to have opinions because I don't necessarily have the domain expertise.
The good news is now I get more knowledge than I used to get in the first month of the first year. So that's goodness. That means my hit rate has increased. But that's the hardest part, to be willing to expose yourself and the lack of your understanding and then convince people that I do have other skills which are needed to run this place.
Do you think you can only do that because of the success you've had before?
And it's very funny. If you look, I was talking to somebody the other day, you're always known by your last act. It doesn't matter what you did before. If you screw something up, people say, oh, that guy, he just screwed this up. Yeah, maybe he was lucky earlier. This time he met his maker. So I don't think that your past successes help you get the job. But that's okay. Now that's table stakes. You're in the job. The question is how you're going to keep it, how you're going to do amazing at it. And that requires you to go back to basics and start from the ground floor and start to understand what needs to happen. And that requires a healthy dose of humility every morning. On
reflection, when you look now, and you can say yes, but I asked Daniel this at UiPath. Yeah. Do you think you're a great CEO?
I think the results speak for themselves, and people can decide if one is a great CEO or not. I think so far, what not just me, the collective team here has been able to achieve hasn't been done in the cybersecurity industry before.
What do you think you did so right that other people hadn't done before that enabled your success?
I don't think it's something we did right. I think, look, we looked at the industry. And yes, I may not have known the cybersecurity industry, but having, had the privilege of investing next to Masa or having, worked at Google for 10 years, one has become a student of business. And you sit there and look and analyze business and say, why is this industry so unique? Why is it that the largest player has 1% market share? That is not the industry structure of any other industry. When you're talking about winner takes all, search, winner took all for the most part, give or take. And there might be one or two people around with a few percentage points of share, but Google took all. You take it YouTube, right? You take a look at Netflix or something like that. You do see in the consumer space there are a lot of industry subsectors where winner takes all. Enterprise also, you'll see in subsectors there are dominant market shares which are in the double digits and sometimes the 20, 30, 40% range. You sit there and say, what is wrong with this industry structure? Why is it 1%? And you look at the waves of success in this industry, the stars of 10 years ago are no longer the stars of today. So that's kind of very unique in cybersecurity. You sit there and say, what are the unique ingredients of this company versus every other company that's out there? And you realize this cybersecurity industry lets innovation happen in the next company that comes around. And they get really good at selling their innovation. They maximize it. They generate huge amounts of cash flow from the better mousetrap they built 10 or 15 years ago. But the next mousetrap is usually built by a different company. So, the approach we took was, I said, look, I'd seen this before when I was at Google. There was generally a feeling that we're really smart. We can build amazing things and other people aren't as well. So I kind of learned from that and said, listen, there are smart people out there. There are 3,000 cybersecurity companies, people like you are funding, or not you, people like you are funding. These people must be really smart. If we're not smart enough to build it ourselves, let's go find someone who's kicked our ass with a lot less resources. So we bought 19 companies in the last 5 years, right? We had no pride of, it's like back to the dose of humility. Somebody else did it better. Let's go bring them on board. And then the difference we made was we said, we'll let them run our business because they did a really good job out there. The only thing we can give them is more resources, more scale on the distribution front. What we can do is give them better innovation. So let's clear the decks, let them run as fast as they can, give them more resources, give them distribution. That's kind of what we did. We've done it 19 times. A lot of them have worked, some of them haven't. But that's allowed us to at least creep up in market share and get to 3 to 4% now for one.
Is there a danger that you lose your innovation and become a roll-up shop? Oh,
let's be clear. Palo Alto in the last 5 years, we have delivered north of 100 products or sub-products, if you will. Through a combination of organic and inorganic. The organic innovation we've done in the last 5 years is more than in the entire history of the company. So in fact, we have been spurred in the category of innovation more and more so because of all these amazing people we've been able to acquire from the outside. Some of our best products, our largest best-selling product right now, XIM, is built in-house. Our SASE product, which competes with Zscaler, was built in-house. So we have a large portfolio, but a lot of the good, successful products have been built in-house. Some of them have been acquired.
When you look at the best and the worst acquisitions, if you separate the two, what are the biggest lessons from the best and the worst? And how does that impact your future decision-making?
The things where they haven't worked out, I think perhaps one of the early ones didn't work out because we really didn't have enough of a playbook about how we want to execute an acquisition. So we were a bit sloppy. That caused some of the founders to leave. That caused a bit of disarray. And, we got better about it, learned from it, pulled up our socks and made sure that the next 18 that we did were going to be a lot better than the first one. I think one or two cases we just called the market wrong. We expected it to be a large market. It didn't sort of transpire because our view on acquisitions is we buy innovation, we buy product, we buy it early. Because if you buy later, you're paying multiples for revenue, which I don't believe in. Why would I pay 10 times revenue? I'd much rather buy a really great team and an amazing product, which has done proof of concept and got 20 or 30 customers, which is working for. So, if you buy them later in life, you end up just paying a lot more money for the distribution/customer base that they have. Some of the ones we bought early, some of the markets didn't pan out the way we expected them to, so they didn't end up being bigger businesses. So it was more of a perhaps wrong technological bet. But on the flip side, the ones which we did do where the market panned out the way it was, and I think to some degree we were able to spur the market and grow the market, those have done really well for us.
Do you believe the best CEOs are the best resource allocators? It's a common saying.
More so, I still go back to the idea most companies are inefficient. I think every company could be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. I think the best CEOs are who are able to motivate lots of people to deliver great outcomes in a consistent, coherent manner together.
Why do you think most companies are inefficient?
I've discovered in the last 6 years that you sit in your room and you say something, you have a point of view, but you need to make sure that point of view is understood by the person out in the front. Mm-hmm. Because very often, I usually say people don't come to work to screw up. Nobody comes to work and say, oh my God, I'm going to do the shittiest job I can possibly do today. Let me go see how I screw up. So if you believe that people are well-intentioned, you've run a rigorous hiring process, you've hired smart people. And the question is, why do you not get the greatest outcomes from everyone in the company? Because if you could get the greatest outcomes from 15,000 people, we'd be 3 times better than we are today. And it boils down to one thing. It is lack of effective communication. So people are sometimes told the what and not the why. And if we understood the why out on the front line, we'd do a much better job of innovating, much better job of adapting, much better job of sort of living by the principles of why we're doing this, as opposed to what I need to do. Many companies get into the what. There's a lot of enablement in every company which is saying, you will do this. When somebody calls, pick up the phone, ask them the following 3 questions. If they don't, go to page 2, do this, and this is how you solve the problem. So, and I understand why people do that, but you have to respect the individual intelligence, make sure you're doing an effective job of communicating the why every day to people. And when things change, you're supposed to make sure everybody knows about it. So I think one of the things that great leaders do is make sure that everybody understands the principle. Everybody understands how they contribute and add value to the overall outcome. Very often people do their work and it's not clear to them how that contributes to the overall whole. And if there's 15,000 people and people say, what I do doesn't make a difference, then they don't make a difference. The question is, does everybody make a difference to the greatest outcome? So I think there's a lot about people, there's a lot about motivating them, a lot about getting outcomes from them, which make for a great company. And I think great CEOs are great business strategists because it's their job to see around corners. You have to see 2 to 3 years out and see where the wind is blowing, because most of the stuff that you can impact is going to create great outcomes 2 to 3 years from now, not in the next 6 to 12 months.
It's challenging for teams when there's change, when there's pivot, when decisions are made and then you have to communicate them and get them on board. Eric Schmidt once said, I wish I'd made better decisions or my better decisions faster.
Yes, I've heard him say that, yes.
How do you think about your decision-making process?
There's some people who like a lot more information to make decisions. And if you all waited for perfect information, it might be too late. So there's always a certain amount of gut, a certain amount of sort of intuition, a certain amount of guesswork involved in making decisions. As I always say, all the easy problems get taken care of before they get to me. All the easy decisions are done. So believe it or not, when you're leading an organization, you end up with the hardest decisions, and they matter. And normally people come to you because they've agitated over them for weeks or months, and they've tried every different thing, because most people don't like coming for help, especially to the CEO. So they're in a bind when they come to you because they haven't been able to solve it. So then they're expecting you to make a good, quick, and thoughtful decision, which are all dangerous words. You want to be good, you want to be quick, you want to be thoughtful. So I think part of our job as leaders is to be able to make good decisions with limited information. You are going to get some wrong. The question is, are you able to identify the wrong decision and go back and course correct it midstream? Are you going to get too invested in your decision and watch it try and play out longer than it should be? So I think decision-making for all of us needs to be quick, but also we need to be adaptable, that if we made the wrong decision, we have the ability to check it and be able to go back and have the courage to go back and say, listen, I think I screwed up. It's time to go change course, and that didn't work.
Nikesh, what's been the best decision you've made as CEO of Palo Alto Networks? And what did you learn from that?
You have to put yourself in a learning mindset, right? You just cannot afford to stop learning because, we're in a very innovative industry. The bad guys are always looking for a new way to come hack you. They don't use the same technique they used yesterday, which we figured out. So every morning you wake up, there is a new technique they figured out to come after you. So you have to be in a constant innovation, learning mindset.
What was the worst decision?
I'm sure there are many. I don't think there's one particular worst decision that I once made. At Google, I was very stroppy with Eric when they bought Android. And I said, Eric, I used to work in the mobile industry. I thought you hired me for my experience. And you shouldn't be buying Android. There's 200 OSs out there. And Eric turned to me and said, you know what? We respect everybody's opinion, but then we do what makes sense to us. I said, okay, I get it. And it kind of worked out. And at Palo Alto, I was very, very enthralled by the idea of doing consumer cybersecurity. And we actually spent a few years trying to build a product. And then we realized that was a bad idea. But we invested resources. But then, like I said, my management team and we collectively sat down and said, shit, it's not working. What do we do? So we had the courage to shut it down, even though we had invested good resources and built something. We said, listen, we cannot go out there with this. It might perpetrate this for some time because we might think that we have to prove something, but we should be able to call a bad decision, and move on, which we did.
When are you able to call a bad decision a bad decision? When should one read the tea leaves and say enough is enough?
As I said, a part of our jobs as CEOs is to look around corners, constantly look at data and reassess what's going to happen. I tell the story. I was on a flight to India. I was going to speak at my alma mater about 35,000 people that were graduating. And I landed in Dubai and I saw all this flutter about ChatGPT. And oh my God, OpenAI has launched this amazing product, which is an AI product. And there was all kinds of rhetoric around it, but I had nothing to do for a few hours. So I tried to figure out how to get access to it, which I was able to, surprisingly. And I started playing with it. And the next 3 hours and the next day, I rewrote my entire graduation speech. And I made it all about how AI is going to be a pivotal moment for every one of us. Now, the reason I tell you the story is that I used the flight back to think about how does that impact Palo Alto. And we launched a series of things internally, which were drastic measures, which it required us to rethink everything. And if you play the movie forward, is AI going to make sure that everything's going to be different in 10 years from now? For sure. 20 for sure. The question is, what do I need to be doing today that I'm the next Amazon and not the next Costco, which is also a great company, but I'm the next Amazon, or I'm the next company that is going to be really successful because we were able to adapt to AI effectively. That's a big challenge. So we spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to do that.
Do you not think we overestimate adoption on a year-long period and underestimate it in a decade-long period?
Yes.
I look at a lot of enterprises today, especially in Europe. Like, I think 48% don't know what Slack is, 92% don't know what Notion is. But like the idea that we are all going to adopt, like the biggest companies will adopt AI overnight, I think is naive, bluntly. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Adopting the internet is one thing. Being able to accelerate your business and use that as a competitive advantage is another thing. Every brick and mortar business by now has adopted the internet, but none of them used it to become Amazon. So the question is adopting enough, or can I use it to, change the trajectory of my business? Those are two different questions. I'm sure every company will adopt it at their pace. Can somebody adopt it well enough that it changes the trajectory of their business? Say, oh my God, look at these guys. They leveraged it and became better, bigger, faster. Everybody has adopted the internet. Everybody's enabled e-commerce. They still have their brick and mortar stores. Mm-hmm. A bunch of entrepreneurs took that trend and said, you know what? I'm going to change the economics of this business in such a way. I don't need physical stores. And I'm going to be able to create shipping warehouses and go ship this to wherever you want. And I can have the everything store. That only one company did. So they used the technological shift to build an entire new business, which is worth $3 trillion compared to everybody else who was able to marginally improve their business. That's the question.
What does that mean in terms of how you think about running Palo Alto today? Like, take that and then apply it to your business.
Am I going to apply AI in my business? Yes. Am I going to get more efficient? Yes. Already we've got people working on it. I'm pretty sure a lot of companies are thinking about it. How do you get leverage from whether you can write code using some of these code tools now, whether you can go to customer support efficiency based on deploying an LLM and ingesting data and building a faster sort of knowledge retrieval system. So we're all going to do that. And that's going to be good for all of our businesses. And, some companies will do it faster than the others and they will have better margins sooner. Some companies will take longer. But the fact that I have better operating margins because I was able to deploy AI internally is not going to make me a better competitor to somebody else unless, maybe I'm using cash generated from it as a better competitor. The question is, can I use the technological change that is out there to build a net new business? So can I build a series of AI security tools that I come out first with and I get disproportionate market share because I was fast?
What will be the determinant of whether you're successful with that or not?
I have better AI security tools that I can build, take more market share.
Were you nervous about such a change of strategy? I remember when you made the change publicly, it was like, whoa.
I think part of what one has to understand is we see the business every day. As I said to you earlier, in the enterprise business, there's a 2 to 3 year, product innovation moat that one has for the most part. Because if you build something cool, other people want to build it because they know they're losing business because they don't have it. So if I've got a 2 or 3 year runway, now's the time to capitalize on it. And I can't wait around for that to diminish or go away. So you know what? We took the decision to go, and we're moving fast. That's what we're going to do.
What do you think is the biggest constraint on your business today, Nikesh?
Our biggest constraint is that time. We're transitioning our business from having sold to different parts of the organization to actually having to get to the leadership and get them bought into this transformation and say, yeah, we get it. This happened for Salesforce. It happened to Workday. It happened to other platform companies. Why shouldn't there be a platform in cybersecurity? Why shouldn't there be a Salesforce of cybersecurity?
Are you having as much fun as you always did?
I have fun every day.
Do you?
I don't. Look, I always joke, the U.S. government takes away 50+% of my money in taxes. I don't get to make all my decisions at home. Here I get to make 90% of the decisions. Great. It's wonderful.
Do you actually, though? That's kind of what I think, though, which is like people think being a CEO is great. And in some ways, it's a bit like being a politician, which is like, yeah, you do. But
no. I think there's a big difference between CEOs and politicians. It's okay for us to, when we make a decision, if some people are not happy, it's okay for us to make that decision because hopefully time will prove that that was a good decision or time will prove the bad decision. And you can go back and say, sorry, you were right and I was wrong. But politicians don't get that opportunity. You make a decision, people are not happy, they don't vote for you. The difference is, it's very funny. There was a CEO of a company who, ran for public office in California, and I had the privilege of having dinner with that person and Larry asked that person, "What's the biggest difference between being a CEO and running for office?" And that person said, "I spent my entire life." Maximizing profit and generating shareholder value, where economics was important because in the end, that's the language shareholders understand. And he said, in politics, there's one person, one vote. People are important. Every person is important. It doesn't matter who they are. And it's a very different mindset. And if you look at people who've been doing one versus the other for a very long time, you realize that, CEOs do not, what did he say earlier? Either people are for the brand or against the brand. There are very few people in the middle. That doesn't go down well in politics.
You don't think? I'd push back on both of those statements. I'd say absolutely. Okay, number one person, one vote. It's funny. Politicians will spend a lot more time with Bernard Arnault than they will someone on the street.
Well, I suspect that has got to do with the fact that economics are important. And
donations
is important. Yes,
donations count, and you need support and financial support, of course, which is why.
But it's still one person, one vote of the election.
Sure, but
you're just going to use that money to try and convince more people. But still, you have to convince each of them.
But the mechanics, the access, the infrastructure that someone can bring is important.
Let's not confuse fundraising with voting, but that's okay.
And then I would. You're almost a politician here, though. And then I would say that absolutely brand, and you are either for or you are against. If I was, an advisor to a political candidate, you have to mean something to someone. You can't.
Yes, I'm sure you have to, but yes, I think that's fair. Politics is also changing. There used to be a lot of people who would go down the middle for a very long time, not to piss somebody off. But now I think people are deciding where the larger vote banks are deciding to stand for that because that helps them get there fast and others, yes. But see, being CEO, I still hold by my statement. Being CEO is nothing like being a politician.
No, I get that, but I think I just successfully pushed back on those two.
Yes, of course, Harry. That's why you do this, so you can get a lot of people here and keep convincing them about what you think. That's okay. I get it.
Can I ask you on one thing that I do find really hard is like relationships to money, actually. When you think about relationships to wealth over time, how has yours changed over time? Because I think it's one which is a challenge, actually.
I came to this country with no money, so it's always good. And I've been blessed that I've had the opportunity to make some money along the way in my various jobs at Google or SoftBank.
Did growing up with no money kind of shape how you think about money?
For sure. Look, it's kind of like you relish everything that you get to enjoy, we ate meat once a week at home, and that's kind of like, oh my God, how does that even work? It works perfectly fine in India. Or, we drank Coke when somebody had a party at our house, and my parents would let me have it because there was excess Coke around in the house. Coke as in Coca-Cola. And do not get confused.
It's a very adventurous household in the Arora household.
No, trust me, far from it. So you enjoy the smaller things in life much more. When you have to go play cricket and one person has a cricket ball, and when they say, I got to go home, they take their cricket ball and go home, and nobody else has one because not many of us could afford having cricket balls lying in our house. So you start to appreciate, that these things have a meaning. Yes, it does shape how you grew up. It does teach you the value of money, teach you the value of resources over time. I think at the same time, even if you have more of it, you don't attribute as much value to it beyond a certain point, because you can go back to living a much simpler life if you have to, because that's how you grew up. That's how I grew up for 25 years of my life. I started in the United States with 5 guys, 1 bathroom, in a 5-bedroom place. I don't know why that place had 1 bathroom and 5 bedrooms in Jamaica Plain, right by Roxbury in Boston. That was my first 2 years and first year and a half in the United States.
It's a very strange configuration for a house, isn't it?
I know. I think it was a large 3-floor house. I think that floor was the sort of the entertaining section. They decided not have too many bathrooms.
That is one busy bathroom in the morning,
It made for some interesting,
I'm going to be honest. I think the secret to a romantic relationship is separate bathrooms, actually. I think this is crucial in that respect.
There was no romantic relationships between those 5 guys over there. So
yeah. No, just to clarify that. And there was no excess Coca-Cola, and there was no romantic relationships in the bathroom. Clarification is important. How do you think about, on the money side, is one thing for yourself? That's an easier thing, actually, because it's only yourself who you're actually influencing. With children, it's another thing. You're influencing another being. When they're brought up in a world of, bluntly, wealth, how do you imbue the same hustle, ambition, hunger in children?
That's a great question. Look, I have 3 kids. I have a 26-year-old and younger kids. And part of it actually boils down to how you bring them up and the values you teach them. And my wife does a really good job of making sure that our kids understand the value of money.
How, if you don't mind me asking, is hard?
They are not allowed to squander resources. They're not allowed to go ahead and get what they want. They have to make sure they understand the value of it. They have to understand that everything is not easy to come by. They have to go do tasks to make sure that they earn the right to enjoy the resources that they have. Now, having said that, look, there's a quality of life difference. There's a quality of life difference in terms of what I grew up with every day or what my kids grew up with every day. And that's something you have to accept, that, there's a difference in quality of life in the United States and India, right? So you have to understand that there's a basic quality of life that is different for your children than you had for yourself. So you've got to make sure you don't overcorrect, because I've seen situations where, people are constantly reminding their kids, when I was your age, I didn't have this, I didn't have that. And eventually the kid says, okay, I get it, but you're no longer in India. You're no longer of that age. This is my peer group. This is what I'm growing up with. So I've got to be, I've got to live within these parameters. So I think to that extent, like, I have seen kids of very wealthy people who have a very strong work ethic. They've tried to prove to themselves, to their family, that they can work hard, they can make it on their own. And I've seen kids of very poor people not want to work hard. So I think part of it is nature, part of it is nurture. I think there are kids who will do things based on how they're brought up, what values that are inspired into them and what they get inspiration from. My 26-year-old works as hard as I do, or sometimes harder.
Has the way that you've done fatherhood changed when you compare how you were as a father with your 26-year-old to how you are with your younger children?
Yeah, I think it depends. If you ask my wife, she'll say probably not a whole lot. If you ask me, that, probably somewhat different. I think the first time around, I probably was running around trying to work hard to make sure I was going to make it. I think now I have a little more time on my hands, so I can stop and smell the coffee, or I can spend more time with my kids as they're growing up. It's never enough time because they grow up fast. So I think from that perspective, my wife would say that I'm not spending enough time and not doing enough with them, which I should be doing. So I think there's balance. But I'm pretty sure that my kids today are getting a lot more of my time than my older kid got when she was growing up.
Do you believe in balance and being truly great? You know, you see the videos of Elon Musk who talks about the early days of him building when he lived in the office. His girlfriend would come visit him in the office. You see Sam Altman who say just like, when you want to stop, keep going. Do you believe in the balance?
Look, one believes in the balance, but I think it would be wrong of any one of us to say that in the process of trying to get what we're trying to get done, we don't sacrifice other things while getting there. So yes, will I sacrifice something on the family side? Sometimes, for sure. Will I sacrifice spending time with my friends in return for this? Yes. Will I end up working nonstop for a bunch of time? Yes. So I think we all aspire for balance, but I think you said that earlier. Like, there's a bunch of us who are mission driven, trying to get stuff done. We over-index in trying to get stuff done.
Is there anything you won't ever sacrifice? Some people are like, I will never sacrifice my 8 hours of sleep. Other people are like, I will never sacrifice my gym session. Other people, I'll never sacrifice,
One has to adapt a little bit all the time. I will never sacrifice my kids' birthdays. I learned that lesson the hard way. My older daughter reminded me once that she'd gone back and looked through the pictures and I wasn't present in a few of them. And I think since that day, that's possibly 14 years ago or 15 years ago, I've never missed her birthday.
Did that upset you?
Yes, it did. And she showed me in the mirror, God bless her, because I remember I flew from Europe one evening at 6 p.m. and I made it back here by 7:30, and I surprised at her birthday dinner party at 8:30, but she didn't think I was going to make it, but I did.
You mentioned your wife several times. I do just have to ask, and I'm learning from you in so many respects on this. What's the secret to a happy marriage? You've been married now for several years, happily.
I think both of us being able to pursue our passions. I think both of us giving each other space to do that, respecting what each one is doing. I think there are no real stereotypes in our household. I think having a healthy balance between spending time together and being able to do other things. I think having each other's back, always knowing that the other person is going to be there for you. That's why you go back home. And I met this guy a long time ago on a flight, and he was in his 70s and I was possibly in my late 20s. And I don't know, this conversation came up about happiness. And he said to me, happiness is about waking up in the morning and being excited about going to work. And happiness is finishing a good day of work and being excited about going home.
Is there anything you could do to be a better husband? I'm
sure I could. But I'm going to save that one for my wife to give you a long list of what she thinks I should be doing to be a better husband.
Who's coming on the show next week? No, I'm joking.
Hope not.
That'd be a surprise. Listen, Nikesh, I want to go into a quick fire with you. I've mined very personal areas, and you've been very patient with me in doing so. I'd love to ask a few quick fire. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so what have you changed your mind on most in the last 12 months?
I'm constantly reassessing our strategy, constantly reassessing who is right for the role or not in different circumstances. So, and I keep moving back and forth on some of these things. And
does that worry you? Like flip-flopping is difficult.
No, I think constantly reassessing is different from flip-flopping. Many years ago, I used to be an equity analyst, and you'd spend a lot of time. And you show up one morning and say, I think we should buy this stock. And the afternoon, something would happen. Like, holy shit, I didn't know that was going to happen. And the company told me they weren't going to do something like this. And they went and did it. Now you have to make a decision. You can flip-flop, which makes you look bad, or you can double down. And you have to reassess. So you learn early in your life as an equity analyst that it's very important to have conviction and not have noise distract you unless there's real signal in what's come up, because noise has the ability to distract you because you just made a big bet. So whilst I go back and forth and reassess, before I act on it, I have to step back and decide if I have enough information and things have changed substantially for me to change my decision. So you asked me what have I changed my mind on? You didn't ask me what have I acted on where I changed my mind. So two different things.
Forever the politician.
It's not a politician. You want to have a honest conversation, I'm giving you an honest answer.
I know. I love it. What are you most concerned about in the world today? What worries you?
I try and worry about things I can control. I try not to worry about things I can't control. There's a lot of things to worry about in the world. You can worry about wars, you can worry about pandemics, you can worry about the economy if you want to, you can worry about elections if you want to. But I think one of the things we all saw in the last 5 years is the tremendous resilience of humankind. If I told you that we all have to live, under closed doors, have to wear a mask, not be able to fly anywhere, not go to public places, not go to the movie theater, not even go to the grocery store, you sit and say, holy shit, that's going to be horrible. All kinds of bad things are going to happen. People are going to start doing crazy stuff and the world is going to come to an end. And it didn't. Like 7+ billion people around the world somehow adapted on a dime, turned around, did it. We lived an orderly life. The stock market went up. You sit and say, holy shit, how did that happen? What just happened? And there were all kinds of, disaster theories. There are all kinds of doomsday theories out there. And people said, oh my God, this is the end of the world. You sit there and say, holy shit, none of that happened. We all are happy. We're all alive. Everybody's appreciating each other more. Some people did all kinds of crazy things. So you sit there and say, that's only possible if you believe that we as humankind have a tremendous amount of resilience. So I'm pretty sure collectively we'll get through most of these things, which we want to worry about right now.
Jensen Huang said, we should lower our expectations and it will lead to increased resilience.
He also said that he wouldn't do NVIDIA again if he had a chance to do it again. So I don't know.
I know. I was like, what? I found it quite disappointing when he said that because I
if he said that, then you wouldn't be able to invest, Harry.
What, in NVIDIA?
Or anything. Like, oh my God, if he's telling founders not to go do something that's really hard, and if he had a chance of doing it again, he wouldn't do it. That's kind of dangerous.
Well, it's quite strategic, isn't it? It's like
that way, no competitors, right?
It's like Sequoia's RIP good times, and then they went on an absolute spree and made a ton of great investments.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I get it now. Yes. See, thank you for clarifying why he said
that. If you could choose one person as a board member who you don't have, who would it be? Could be anyone.
Mahatma Gandhi.
Well, not anyone.
Oh, come on.
Come on. You went for Gandhi?
Of course. I told you he was a great guy, nonviolent, people, very inspiring. People liked him.
Yeah, on that silent protest, he'll really add to your board, won't he? Yeah. What do you think, Mahatma?
No, he was not a violent guy. This is good. Always good to have nonviolent board members.
Yeah, I was going to add Carl Icahn for you, but I guess that's a bit of a different one.
See, the very important thing is when you ask these questions about pick somebody, it's better to pick people who are not alive.
What's the kindest thing that anyone's done for you?
Oh, a lot of people have also kind things for me. I remember when I had written to 400 plus alumni of the Northeastern University MBA program, and my backup plan was to go to a PhD at Boston College because it was 1992. It was really hard to find a job. And I wrote 7 letters to Fidelity because there were 7 alums at Fidelity. And one of them wrote on the CV, said it to 3 of his direct reports saying, her CV looks interesting. And I got a call from one of those 3 people. I ended up getting that job. And that was very kind of him. He didn't have to. He just took a look at the CV. He wrote it, sent it to somebody. That was amazing. Ended up getting an interview, ended up getting a job. So,
Nikesh, where do you want to be in 10 years?
Oh, I don't plan life. I do not plan life. There's nowhere I want to be in 10 years. I want to wake up happy in the morning, do what I'm doing, enjoy it. I want to go home happy, have a great time with my family.
You didn't set a stock price for when I hit this?
No. The stock price done amazingly well from when I started. It's going to result in a reasonably good outcome for me and a lot of people over here. So it doesn't matter. You're keeping score. Stock prices are about keeping score. They're not about making some amount of money.
Thank you for putting up with me, Nikesh. I appreciate that I'm not the easiest person. My mother tells me often. But I think you've really had extended patience today because I've probably been more difficult than normal. So I really appreciate it.
I have to go and listen to your other sessions to understand if you're more difficult or equally difficult.
Well, I think the answer is you've already listened to all of them and you love them. Nikesh. Thank you for your undying support. But no, honestly, you've been fantastic.
Thank you for your time, Harry. It was fun.